Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nessie's Dead. We are your hosts, Spencer and Helen.
Hello.
Hello. And I'm proud of you. You didn't ask for a single hint
I didn't.
regarding what we're talking about.
I wanted to be completely clueless this time.
You know what's funny? I actually gave you one because I thought you were going to ask. And when we were talking about the research for this episode, I made a comment. Like, there was a certain word I used to describe the way that I went about the research. And I thought, okay, if she asks me for a hint for this week's episode, I'm going to tell her to refer back to me talking about the research. It would have been so cryptic and confusing.
Dang it. Okay, I don't know.
Well, I'm very excited because this is my favorite kind of spooky content. So we will be talking about a creature.
A cryptid.
No.
A mermaid.
No. So I'm not going to tell you quite yet exactly what this creature is, but I am going to go into a little bit of its family, the type that this creature is really quick.
Okay.
It's a type of shapeshifter. Now, I feel like you're probably going to have a pretty good idea as to what shapeshifter it is once we get going.
A skinwalker.
You'll see. So, I know all of our studio audience out there is wondering, but what is a shapeshifter? Well, I'll tell you. A shapeshifter is a mystical creature that can shift shape. Duh.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a human who can shift into an animal, or an animal into a human, or a god or goddess into a mystical creature, or an animal, or a human, or an accumulation of all of the above. The possibilities are kind of endless in how a shapeshifter can manifest. What else is endless is the occurrence of shapeshifters all over the world throughout history. It's kind of like how we talked before about how all these different cultures and civilizations and whatnot around the world have had the same creatures and same stories, how every ancient civilization has their version of a horned god or goddess, or every culture has their own version of Sasquatch.
Yeah.
It's all over the world. But the first known account, or what is considered to be the oldest documentation of a shapeshifter, can be found in France. Specifically in the cave of Trois Frères in southwestern France.
Oh, I like how you said that.
I said that really well.
You did. I'm so proud of you.
I took French in high school.
Oh, fancy.
So in this cave, there is an ancient cave painting or cave drawing that dates back to 13,000 BCE. And it's referred to as the Sorcerer. It depicts a deer or horse body with very deer or horse-like ears, a tail, antlers on its head, but it has a human face with human arms and legs, and it's standing upright on its back legs. So it's part human, part animal,
Yeah.
and it is believed that it is representation of some kind of ceremony where someone is shifting shape, which I think that's so cool that is what is the common idea to this cave drawing, that it is depicting ancient shapeshifters.
Yeah, that is really cool. I didn't know that was a thing in cave drawings. Yeah.
There are all sorts of different kinds of shapeshifters. I'm not sure exactly what type of shapeshifter the sorcerer in that French cave is, but we have the Navajo skinwalkers, who are a favorite here on Nessie's Dead. We have all sorts of different gods and goddesses that can shapeshift. We have European vampires that can turn into bats, the Japanese obaki, the Wendigo, which is another Native American creature, which you covered in the North American Cryptid episode.
And it was a Wendigo.
Yeah.
No.
But there's one shapeshifting creature in particular that I want to talk about, and that is the werewolf. So, shall we take a plunge into the lore, the history, and accounts of real-life werewolves?
Yes.
Okay.
I am so ready. Ooh. Okay, go.
So it's actually kind of interesting because I'm not a werewolf person.
Me neither, but I don't know too much about werewolves other
Well,
than
I'm about to
movies.
blow your
I
mind.
know, you're about to hit me with this.
Like, obviously, I'm really into mystical creatures, but the werewolf was never where I've gravitated towards, and this was not what I thought I was going to be covering. It just naturally happened, and I'm very excited to go into it.
Yeah, I was gonna say this doesn't seem like anything you've ever chit-chatted about with me.
No.
No. We've never talked about werewolves over spaghetti, so I'm ready.
No. We do hint, well, we did talk about a werewolf in the New Orleans episode with the
Yeah,
Rougarou, but it
the
wasn't
Rougarou. I
exactly
love the
a werewolf.
Rougarou.
Me too.
God, he's cute.
But werewolves.
Werewolves.
So, a werewolf is a mystical creature from folklore, typically depicted as a human who can shapeshift into either a wolf or a wolf-human hybrid. The name werewolf comes from the Old English word, which means man-wolf, and it's also referred to as lycanthrope, which is Greek, lykos meaning wolf, and anthropos meaning man, so literally man-wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a bunch of other origins and different types of names with it, but these are the two that I'm going to primarily focus on and refer to.
Okay, got it.
Now, like all the other shapeshifters, werewolves are kind of found all over the world. However, they're predominantly found in Europe. So most of this episode will be taking place in Europe. So to talk about the lore of the werewolf, you first have to talk a little bit about the wolf itself. Now, it's very interesting because wolves have kind of been the center point of interest with human culture for centuries. Their skins would actually be worn as cloaks and as accessories and whatnot, and the use of wearing the skin was usually paired alongside going into battle. There were these Nordic warriors that were referred to as berserkers. They would wear animal skins and head out into battle. They would use that animal to like channel its spirit. So like if they're wearing the skin of a wolf, they would then channel the wolf spirit and would kind of act like really wild and feral during wars, which is kind of weird. But
I don't know. I think you probably need a little hype going into a battle.
probably.
Yeah.
They're all like, they're passing out the animal pelts. You get a bear, you get a wolf, you get a tiger. Sorry, Stan. All we had left was the beaver.
Oh, poor Stan.
He can cut down some trees.
Yeah.
But scholars believe that the interest that people have always had in wolves partially comes from the fact that first they're considered like a really strong totem animal.
Yeah.
So kind of like what I was talking about with the Nordic warriors, the berserkers, they would channel the wolf spirit because it was very fierce. But wolves are actually relatively similar to humans in the sense that they are communal. They live in packs the way that we are tribal beings and we live with families and whatnot. They also go after the same food sources that we historically have always gone after. I also think it's interesting to note how wolves in just the modern era have become a common favorite animal, but whenever someone's favorite animal is a wolf, they're like really into wolves, right?
Yeah, they have like the shirt with the moon in the background.
Yes,
we
I
all
love that shirt.
know that guy. I think you
Yeah.
have a shirt like that, don't you?
Mine's alligators.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's even better though.
I think, no offense to the wolf people, I think alligators are a little cooler.
Yeah, they are.
So, like I said, another term for werewolfism is the lycanthrope. Officially, the term would be lycanthropy. Now, lycanthropy is not only in reference to werewolf lore, but it can also refer to clinical lycanthropy. It is a rare psychiatric syndrome where someone believes they have transformed into an animal. And this mental illness actually can be traced back throughout history, even into the biblical era. So the oldest one that I want to bring up really quick was Prince Mahid al-Dawla of the Boyid Empire, which is now modern Iran and Iraq. He was convinced that he had turned into a cow.
Ew.
Yeah. Another one, a little more modern, is an unnamed man, a 19-year-old man in Florida was arrested in 2016 after he was found on top of and attacking a 59-year-old man outside. He was biting at his face and eating chunks out of his flesh and growling.
I remember that one.
You do?
Yeah. Didn't he kill the guy and like his wife or something? They were both older.
Yeah, I don't think, I don't know if the woman was connected, but they found a 53-year-old woman in his garage that was like in really bad shape, and both of his victims did die. He was arrested and put under some kind of psychiatric watch, and he was diagnosed with lycanthropy, and his family was like, he said he believed he was either part dog or part horse.
Mm-hmm. That's a really crazy case.
That is. There's not a whole lot to dive into other than that, but it is an interesting little piece to throw in, I thought.
Yeah.
Now, the oldest account of the werewolf actually comes from the Babylonian text, the Epic of Gilgamesh. This dates back to around 2100 BCE, and in it, goddess Ishtar turns a shepherd into a wolf. She does this because he rejects her. And after he says no, she's like, fine, I'll turn you into a wolf then. Now, this is an example of one of the werewolf archetypes where the person inflicted with the werewolf problem is like a victim. He's kind of helpless. They're an innocent person. He said no to goddess Ishtar, so she turned him into a werewolf. However, there is another archetype of the werewolf that is considered like the damned. And that's the one who does something wrong, and his punishment is to become a werewolf. An example of this in history is King Lycaon. This was a Roman story where god Jupiter punishes the king for practicing cannibalism.
Oh, we get that a lot in cryptid things.
The cannibalism, yeah. The cannibalism throughout history, a lot of themes are if you practice cannibalism, you will become a werewolf, or you're practicing cannibalism because you already are a werewolf.
Yeah, or it's like a curse from...
Yeah. The Wendigo was the same concept.
Yeah.
With this particular story, he was depicted as becoming a wolf, but had human eyes, which I think is just disgusting.
Like my dog.
Yeah, your dog, I think, used to be human.
Probably.
So we have plenty of tales of people being turned into werewolves because of a god or a goddess doing so to them. However, throughout history, there are also stories of people being turned into wolves by witches, shamans, and other types of mystical workers. And there are even documents of saints turning people into werewolves.
Oh,
one of which...
never heard of that.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? So there's Saint Natalis, and he turned a whole family into wolves for a solid 7 years. And then we also have, you're going to know this guy, Saint Patrick. He turned a Welsh king into a wolf. Yeah.
I did not know that.
That sounds like witchcraft to me.
It does.
So we have that idea of turning into a wolf through someone else doing it to you, through some kind of magical power, right? But similar to the berserkers, you could also turn into a werewolf, theoretically, simply by wearing the wolf's skin. A common belief in history is wearing the skin alone, or particularly doing it as a belt, like fastening the wolf's pelt into a belt, could turn you into one. Yeah.
That easy, just like that.
Yeah, that easy.
Wow. Why haven't we tried this?
Yeah, I don't want that.
I'm curious.
I'd rather play the elevator game than be a werewolf.
Maybe.
Now, in Italian, German, and French folklore, it is suggested that stepping outside on a Wednesday or a Friday and then sleeping outside with the light of the full moon on your face, that will turn you into a werewolf.
It seems so easy these days.
Or back in those days. It's a little harder now.
Oh, okay.
In Russian folklore, it's suggested that if a witch leaves her girdle under a house...
How dare she?
Yeah, if she leaves her girdle underneath a house on the day that those who live inside of it are getting married, all of those inside will turn into wolves.
I have so many questions about why she would leave her girdle under a house.
And how?
Yeah.
I
Why?
guess you could lift up the floorboards, but I feel like that's a lot of work
It
to turn
is.
someone into a wolf.
Yeah.
Serbian folklore suggests that drinking water out of a wolf's paw print on the ground will turn you into one.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, you have the classic idea of potions or simply being scratched or bitten, which is kind of the most commonly used practice of turning into one in Hollywood.
Yeah, that's the one I know.
Now, of course, these are some ways to turn into a werewolf, but we also have some remedies in case you are not a fan of being one yourself. Now, the ancient Greeks and Romans believed that the use of extreme physical activity was enough to act as a cure. So I guess it would like exhaust the inner wolf spirit, causing it to die, so it would free you from the infliction. Italian folklore suggests that hitting a werewolf on the head with a knife will do the trick. Medieval European lore says that the plant wolfsbane will do the trick. I'm not totally sure what you do with the plant, but it's supposed to cure you of werewolfism, or it can be done through an exorcism and prayer. Now, speaking of medieval Europe, this is when the werewolf lore like really takes off. Werewolves were kind of common throughout history, but they really blew up in medieval Europe. It's believed that the reason that it initially kind of blew up was because wolves were attacking people's livestock. So it kind of became this thing of, well, God wouldn't allow wolves to attack my livestock, so it must be work of the devil with a werewolf.
Yeah, everything was the devil.
Yeah. At the time, initially, it was considered a sin to even believe in a werewolf because nothing and no one had the power to transform into a wolf other than God himself, right? However, that fear of the werewolf really persisted throughout medieval Europe, and the church eventually comes around and is like, okay, it's not a sin anymore, and the only way to cure werewolfism is through an exorcism.
They're out here exercising people.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Which we will actually get a little bit into a werewolf exorcism in a moment.
So it's going to be something different, probably.
Perhaps.
Oh,
We'll
perhaps.
see.
Okay.
We'll see. Now, during this time, it sparked, I think, a lot of fear of things, just the unknown in general. We were having a lot of witch hunts in medieval Europe. But alongside the witch hunts, we were having werewolf hunts, and they kind of acted together. So if you were tried for witchcraft, you were being tried as a werewolf at the same time. And it was believed that if you were a witch, you were also a werewolf.
Well, we didn't get that. That's not fair.
Yeah. Now, this dates back to the 1400s at the Valais witch trials in Switzerland. That was the first time the werewolf mention came up, and it kind of just took off from there for like a solid 200 years. I think actually in the Salem witch trials, they noted these witches being able to turn into wolves.
I mean, that makes a little bit more sense than werewolves.
Yeah, but it was
But
considered
still,
that they were just witches and werewolves, and like you were just interchangeable,
okay.
and that it was all the work of the devil, and that was the only reason you had the power to do it at all.
Gotcha.
So the wolf really went from being an image of like power. People were channeling its fierceness into it was of the devil and something that needed to be feared and taken down and essentially controlled. Alongside industrialization, the werewolf kind of died down. The fear was no longer super present. It went from being something that everyone was afraid of to being more of a fixture in Gothic literature, then obviously shifts into Hollywood. And we had the first werewolf movie in 1913 called, fittingly, The Werewolf. Now, there is no way to watch this film today because at the time that it came out, it was lost in a fire. The only copy of the film was in that fire.
Oh, no. So it is literally gone forever.
Yes, but it was not long for the werewolf theme to come back into film, and it ended up becoming a really major pillar in the horror world. I feel like in the 90s it really blew up, and then into the 2000s. I mean,
Yeah.
where you were around during like that werewolf craze in the late 90s.
Thank you for pointing out that.
Well, I was too.
When you were around in the late 1900s.
Yeah, I was in a different age group.
Slightly.
So that is the history and lore of werewolves. Now we can transition into some werewolf accounts. So first up, we have Peter Stump, also known as the Werewolf of Bedburg. Are you familiar with this at all?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Enlighten me.
All of the documentation of this comes from a 16-page pamphlet that came out in 1590 detailing this case. So it takes place in the late 1580s, and all of a sudden people were finding their livestock mutilated in the morning. They were like, okay, this seems like it's not the work of just some animal. They started thinking, maybe it's a werewolf. Well, suddenly all these women and children were going missing, and their bodies were being found the next morning after they go missing, badly mutilated. So all of a sudden, this talk of the werewolf is all over the village. And for whatever reason, people start pointing fingers at Peter Stump. Peter Stump was a local German farmer. He's from the town of Bedburg, and he was born sometime in the 1530s. We don't know exactly when, but sometime in that decade. It is actually said that he was missing his left hand due to some accident that happened a few years prior. But people who were seeing the supposed werewolf around the village reported that the werewolf was conveniently missing its left paw. So people were putting two and two together.
Yeah.
Obviously, they didn't have anything to pin the werewolf accusations on him quite yet, but in 1589, some werewolf hunters ended up capturing Peter Stump after they were tracking down the werewolf, lost track of him, and then come across Peter Stump alone in the woods.
A werewolf hunter. What a job.
I know.
Gosh. We need to bring that back.
I agree.
I wonder if it has health insurance. Probably. It seems dangerous.
Yeah, I wonder if you get hazard pay.
Oh, that's nice.
But they end up being like, okay, well, there's already talk of this guy being the werewolf, so we're going to capture you and bring you in. They bring him into town, and they put him on a torture device called the rack.
Is this the one that, like, stretches you out?
I think so, yeah.
Ugh.
And while he's on it and being tortured, he makes his confession. He confesses to having killed and eaten human and animals and explained that he was indeed the werewolf.
So he just comes out and he's like, I'm the werewolf.
Yeah, I'm eating everyone. During his confession, he explained that he had been practicing black magic since the age of 12, and through that, the devil granted him with a special belt, giving him the power to become a werewolf.
If only that's how the devil actually worked.
Yeah, he actually said this in his confession, quote, "The likeness of a greedy, devouring wolf, strong and mighty, with the eyes great and large, which in the night sparkled like fire, a mouth great and wide, with most sharp and cruel teeth, a huge body and mighty paws," end quote. Also in his confession, he claimed to have killed and eaten 14 children, one of which was his own son, and 2 pregnant women.
Oh.
At the time of his confession, he had a girlfriend who is referred to as his mistress, but I think the only reason she's referred to as the mistress is because he was not married to her, and it was a very, very different time.
Yeah, definitely.
But they were coming for, like, the townspeople were like, oh, they're related. There's a little bit of a theory that they really actually were related and having this affair together.
Oh, like
and
Kentucky.
That's where, yeah.
Yeah.
But Bedburg, Germany.
Oh.
And supposedly that might be where the werewolf claims came from. They were like, oh, he's already a sinner. He might as well be a demon.
Yeah.
But it could also have been kind of the other way. And they're like, oh, he's the werewolf. Oh, I bet his girlfriend is actually his sister.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's really no way to tell. But
both make sense, though, for that time period.
Yes. Now, apparently, he didn't just have this girlfriend or mistress. He was also having intercourse with a demon known as a succubus, and supposedly the devil sent this demon to him as like a gift.
He's doing a lot.
Yeah, he's really busy.
Does he have a day job?
Farmer.
Oh, he's got plenty of time.
But he ended up getting executed on October 31st, 1589. Alongside him in this execution was his girlfriend and his daughter. I think that was just like guilty by association.
Poor people.
Yeah. Now, he was strung onto a wheel, which with every turn tore flesh from his body.
Oh, did they roll it?
I'm not totally sure.
I feel like that's the one where they roll and it just like keeps rolling and it like, ugh. Maybe not.
We should do a medieval torture episode.
We should. There's so many. I am fascinated by those.
You should cover that.
I know quite a bit, so maybe.
Do it next.
Maybe. We'll see.
Okay. And then, after the wheel situation ripped off his skin, his limbs were broken with the handle of an axe, and he was beheaded and set on fire. His daughter and his mistress were then strangled to death, and their bodies were also added to the fire.
Well, I mean, at least they didn't have to go, like, super torture.
On the torture device, yeah. I mean, strangulation's probably a hard way to go.
It seems like it
not as bad as the wheel.
No. It seems like it would take a while, though.
Yeah, that's the story of Peter Stump. Now, he is officially considered to be a serial killer and cannibal, but there are, of course, plenty of people who do believe he really was a werewolf. But the fact that he confessed to the werewolfism and all of the crimes during the confession, it's kind of hard to say because it seemed almost maybe like a forced confession because he was in the middle of being painfully tortured on the rack.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was literally just about to say. I do think, if the rack is what I'm thinking, I do think they just like slowly stretch you. Again, I may be wrong on that one, but any kind of torture device, you're eventually going to just confess.
Yeah. So, but officially, according to history, he's a serial killer that had at least 14 victims.
The serial killer part, I do believe.
Okay, but not the werewolf part?
No, not the werewolf. Oh my gosh, we have something I don't believe.
Yeah, I just got you.
Wow, you got me.
Wow.
That's the first time.
Well, let's see what you think about the next one.
Okay.
So this next one's a little more modern. It actually takes place in the U.S. This is the Beast of Bray Road.
I don't know this.
Really?
Nope.
Okay.
Should I?
Well, you're not like as into the creature situation as I am, so I'm not shocked, I guess.
Yeah.
So this centers around, obviously, Bray Road, which is a rural farm road in Walworth County, Wisconsin. It all starts in 1936 at the St. Coletta School for Exceptional Children. This was a Catholic school, and on the property there, before the school was built and established, there was a Native American burial ground there, which I'm sure anyone who listens to a podcast like this is well aware that you do not build on Native American burial grounds.
No.
There are plenty of scary movies that tell you exactly what happens when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I will say is that it wasn't like a big graveyard situation. It was a few select burial mounds that remained, and the school had sectioned them off to be preserved. They were like on the other end of the property in a field. So they weren't built over, but a lot of people do believe that the reason that this creature's first sighting occurs is in reference to the fact that it was a Native American burial ground.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, it was 1936, and we have a night guard named Mark Shackleman. This one night, he's out doing his rounds. He's walking by this field, and in the distance, he can hear this like scratching, digging noise. He looks over toward, like across the field at those burial mounds, and he sees this figure digging in them. He at first thought, like, he can't really make out what he's seeing. It's kind of far, it's dark, but he at first thought that it was some kind of dog or coyote or something.
Mm-hmm.
Then suddenly the creature stands up upright like a person on its two back legs, reaching about 6 feet tall.
Just a big werewolf.
Yeah. So he notes that this creature had a muscular, furry body, a very obvious canine kind of face. I guess the night guard just kind of stood there in shock, not sure what was happening, what he was looking at, and the creature just kind of runs off.
I
Now,
guess maybe him freezing was probably helpful then.
probably, yeah, but he does return to work the next night.
Oh,
And,
no, I would absolutely not.
yeah, and he's literally out doing rounds alone
No.
outside. Like, I would not. I would have, like, an army of people with me.
Yeah. I just would get a different career path at that point.
Yeah, but he was outside alone doing his rounds again. He sees the same thing digging over at the burial mound. But this time, the creature stands up upright yet again, shows its teeth, and starts growling at him. He describes the growl as sounding like an animal growl, but also sounding like a human at the same time.
Mm.
Now, that was the first official report of the Beast of Bray Road. It kind of went silent after that, but then reports of the creature started popping back up in the late 80s. All of the reports describe pretty much the same creature. It's this like monstrous dog or wolf-like humanoid kind of beast with large teeth, gray-brown fur or hair, and shiny yellowish eyes. The resurgence of reports start in 1989 with Lori Andreezy. She worked at a bar in town and was on the way home from work at about 1:30 in the morning. She, of course, was driving down Bray Road. So, like I said, Bray Road, it's kind of like a backwoods, curvy country road. And driving down those at night alone is scary enough by itself. But while she's driving, she comes up to a bend in the road, and in the distance, she sees what she believes is a man on the side of the road, crouched down.
Mm.
That alone is terrifying to me. She then drives a little bit closer and notices that it's a dog-like, kind of humanoid creature with gray-brown hair crouching down on the road with roadkill in its paws. And she notes that the paws were faced upright. So you know how like on a dog or a wolf or any other animal, their paws always face down.
Yeah.
This creature, its paws were faced up like a human's hands would.
Oh.
She, of course, reports this, and a few other accounts come flooding in. Then, not long after that, Halloween night, 1991, we have Doris Gibson. She was driving down Bray Road, and she hit something. She feels this big thump under her car. She's like, oh crap. She pulls over, looks in her rearview mirror, but nothing's there. She's like, okay, kind of weird. So she gets out of her car, which...
No.
Again, you're on this, like, backcountry road.
No.
You hit something, but it's no longer there. Just keep... Like, I don't know. I would be terrified to just get out.
I wouldn't get out.
She walks around her car to assess the damage and to see if there was an animal that she had hit, but nothing was there. All of a sudden, though, she hears this rustling coming from, like, the woods or whatever, and she looks over and sees this giant creature charging at her.
Mm-mm.
She has just enough time to jump back in her car and close the door when this giant creature jumps on the hood of her car, or jumps somewhere on top of her car, but apparently slid off. So I guess it was a really foggy night, and I guess there was all this condensation on her car, and she believes it caused the creature to slide off. But apparently her car was pretty beaten up with scratches and dents. She's, like, convinced that it was from this creature.
I mean, it makes sense a little bit.
Yeah. Now, she reports this to the police. I think the police reported to animal control, and what is really interesting is animal control had a folder about this creature titled Werewolf.
What's animal control gonna do?
Well, I think people, because at this time the reports were like flooding in, and I think everyone was kind of under the impression that some kind of wild animal was just on the loose.
Well, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, but the file on it was titled Werewolf.
Mm.
Also at this time in 1991, we have a local reporter, Linda Godfrey, and she was sent by a paper from the area to do an article about this creature. Doing this article, she interviews a bunch of people in town, and it actually leads her into having a career in werewolves and cryptozoology. She ends up traveling around North America and I think Europe and even Australia, documenting reports of werewolves, which is like really cool.
Yeah, to be able to make a career out of that.
Yeah, but she was convinced that the Beast of Bray Road was very real. She notes that the credibility is there because all the different people that came forward with the accounts of it, it was like all sorts of different types of people. Now, something very interesting to note is that in this area, at the time, the area was being plagued with animal mutilations where the internal organs were being extracted. Now, I'm fascinated by, it's usually referred to as cattle mutilation,
Yeah,
but I'm fascinated by that.
you are.
Like, I want to do a whole episode on that. So for anyone who's not familiar, it's where like the farmer comes outside in the morning and all the cows are dead, but their like tongue or their rectum or both or some other internal organ will be like surgically removed
It's
with
very
like
odd.
precision, and there's no blood, like no blood anywhere, no signs of anything. And this isn't like some weird conspiracy. This is like actually documented. Texas actually has a lot of cattle mutilation.
We do. It's weird.
So I feel like that could add some credibility to the Beast of Bray Road, perhaps.
Perhaps maybe it is interdimensional or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like our Bigfoot.
It could be a skinwalker.
Could be.
And then the most recent accounts of the Beast of Bray Road actually were in 2018 and 2020.
That seems like not that long ago.
Yeah. So he's
5
still
years ago?
running around.
From when, though? This started like way back in the day.
The late 30s.
Oh, he's old.
Yeah. Now, some people believe that it's some type of wolf dog or coyote dog hybrid, or that it is just a wolf, or a black bear with mange.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't buy those ideas at all.
Mm-mm.
And also, wolves are not commonly, like, you can spot a wolf in Wisconsin, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah, I wouldn't really picture that as a place where there'd be wolves.
There are wolves in Minnesota, but I think they're more like up north, like further, like towards Canada.
That makes sense because it's cold.
Yeah.
They're only in the cold, though, aren't they?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they used to be in England back in the day, but wolves were actually eradicated from England in the 1500s, probably during the werewolf panics.
I wonder how they did that. Just killed them all?
I don't know. Alongside witch trials.
Wolf trials.
But speaking of England, I have a quick story about another werewolf that is relatively modern, and this one takes place in England. And his name is the Beast of Barmston Drain, also known as the Hull werewolf, or most commonly referred to as Old Stinker.
I like Old Stinker.
So he actually gets that name from having supposedly terrible breath.
Aw, but it sounds cute. Old Stinker.
Yeah. And sightings of this creature go back to the 1700s in this area. He's mostly described as being very large, kind of a dog-man beast that stands about 8 feet tall while upright on 2 legs. And some reports suggest it's more like humanoid mixed with wolf. Other reports say it's more wolf-like with like human features. The lore of this creature centers around Hull, England, and the sightings are as recent as 2016. It all kind of starts in, I believe, 2015 in December and continued into the summer of 2016. During the time, there were a total 11 reported sightings of the creature.
That seems like a lot.
I know, in like 6 months.
Yeah.
And it was all around this industrial area near a large drain referred to as the Barmston Drain. Now, there were 7 accounts in June alone. One woman in August of 2016 claimed she saw the creature, and she described it as being about 8 feet tall and had a very obviously human face. Another woman said that she saw it standing upright on 2 legs, and then it gets down on all 4s and walks like a dog with ease. It had qualities that a human would have, but it also had qualities that a dog would have. When this all kind of started, there were 2 separate newspapers with 2 separate accounts that were published on the same day of the same creature. So to me, that says something.
Yeah. It's a lot of people. And such a short time period, too.
Yeah. But there's nothing too recent with that creature.
Nobody got a picture or a video?
No, of course. Well, no, actually, there is a video. I did watch,
Oh.
like, a 5-second, like,
Grainy?
yeah, very grainy.
Filmed on a potato.
Yeah, like a doorbell cam.
Oh. It's always got to be like that, though.
Yeah, but it was very unsettling to watch, which normally I feel I'm like, that's very obviously fake. But this one I was like, oh, it looks like a weird dog.
I feel like sometimes those are a little bit more realistic. I feel like when you get one that's like really crisp and clear, it's easy to be like,
Yeah. Now, I have one more werewolf account to get into, and that is the South End werewolf. This is where all my werewolf research actually began earlier this week. But this case revolves around Bill Ramsey from the South End area of Essex, England, which is like a coastal town, I believe. And he had a pretty normal childhood. Like everything was normal until 1952 at the age of 9. He was outside playing one day in his backyard or something. And it was a pretty warm day. He's probably all hot and sweaty. But all of a sudden, he starts to get this rush of being freezing cold. He described it as feeling like it's like a hot summer day and you step into a meat freezer. They're like, there should be no reason for him to be getting so cold all of a sudden. Now, alongside this rush of being freezing cold, he had this like extreme rage and adrenaline that just came out of nowhere. As this is happening, he has this urge to run into the nearby ocean for like no reason. He just felt like he needed to run into the ocean. He said that his mind was plagued with the image of wolves.
That's wild. None of that really like goes together.
No, but then it gets weirder.
Oh.
So as this rage and freezing cold feeling builds in his body, again, out of nowhere, he becomes incredibly strong. And he starts like losing his mind. He grabs a fence post in the yard and rips it up out of the ground. And he's 9 years old.
What?
9 years old.
Okay, I don't know about this.
And then there was like this wire around the fence that he started biting at and chewing on, like ripped it out with his mouth. While all this is happening, his
mouth?
Yeah. Well, the wire with his mouth.
Okay.
While all this is happening, his mother is watching through the window in shock. And she's obviously concerned and confused watching her 9-year-old kid
I mean,
a fence post for no reason out of the ground.
As one would be.
But after this weird, seemingly isolated incident, everything went back to normal. And he calmed down and was fine. He grows up, gets married, has 3 kids, and goes on to be a carpenter. But he occasionally would feel that sudden burst of being freezing cold with the weird, angry adrenaline. He would always ignore it, kind of push it down, and not really think too much of it. So like 15 years go by. In the late 60s, in the middle of the night, he claimed that he could hear this heavy breathing near his bed. And he thought it was like the breathing of an animal. And he suddenly realizes that it was his own breath, that he was hearing himself breathe like an animal.
He's transforming.
Kind of, yeah. But then everything kind of went still again. He went back to being normal until 1983. He was at a bar with some friends and he got struck with that cold adrenaline feeling. He goes and hides out in the bathroom. He's trying to calm down. While he's in there, he looks in the mirror and claims that his face started to transform into the face of a wolf.
Oh, man. What do you even do in a public setting if that is to be true?
Well, he went out to the back into the bar and was like, hey, can we go? And his friends were like, yeah, sure. So they all get in the car and are driving home. All of a sudden, Bill gets like, that rush gets back to him. He starts growling and his hands start shaping into claws, and he reaches over, well, lunges. He lunges over at his friend and takes a big hard bite out of his leg. So they,
Oh,
yeah,
I don't think they're friends anymore.
I don't know if I would be friends with that person anymore.
No.
But he then, like, after the bite, he calms down and goes back to normal. And I think, if I understand it correctly, when he calms down, he doesn't remember what happened. Like, he knows he has this problem, but he doesn't remember the incident until they're like, you just did this to me.
Total amnesia.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Now, also in 1983, Bill suddenly has chest pains, and he thinks he's having a heart attack, so he checks himself into the hospital. But all of a sudden, it actually wasn't a heart attack. He was wolfing out again, and he starts to feel that same crazy cold feeling with the adrenaline rush. So while he's getting his blood drawn by a nurse, his veins apparently start to pump up really crazy, and the nurse is like, what is happening?
Ew, I don't like that.
No, I don't either. He starts barking and growling at her, and then leaps up and attacks her, biting her, of course, and runs out of the hospital room. And it actually took 3 to 4 people to tackle him down because he was so strong in the moment that he just, like, pushed everything and pushed everyone and fought everyone off.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. But then a police officer arrests him, puts him in handcuffs. He comes back to normal and is obviously kind of like,
What the
what
heck?
happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I believe the next day in the same hospital, he attacked another nurse. And this was like a cycle that kept happening. He would check himself into a hospital and be like, I feel like I'm going crazy, would have this like episode, but then go back to normal after it happened. Or he would take himself to a police station and go crazy and then calm down. He was getting all these tests done, but in the MRIs and in the psychiatric evaluations, they could not find anything wrong with him.
Not a single thing.
No. Now, at one point, a doctor was like, I think you should voluntarily check yourself into a mental hospital. And he was like, no, I'm not going to do that, because he didn't want the stigma. He didn't want to be, quote, crazy.
Yeah, I get it.
But I'm like, but you want the stigma of being the person that turns into a dog and attacks everyone?
That's true, too. Those are tough decisions.
Yeah. Now, this was happening on and off for quite a while. It like really started progressing throughout the late 80s. And in 1989, he, I think, woke up in the middle of the night and started choking his wife.
Oh.
But, yeah. It was around that incident that I think he was like just kind of exhausted all efforts to get help for the most part. And he was being talked about in the news and the like local paper and whatnot. A famous Connecticut-based couple hear about him.
Oh.
Do you know who?
I'm guessing it's going to be Lorraine and Ed.
Yep.
Yep.
Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Here they come.
Famous demonologists.
They're going to get on this money train.
They hear of Bill's story and are convinced that he was possessed by a wolf demon. They reach out to him, and he was like, what the hell? No, like that stuff's not real. I'm not a werewolf. But I think he reached a point of being like, okay, why not? I've tried everything else. Let's give it a shot. Lorraine was convinced that he needed an exorcism.
They always do this. These two are always coming in for an exorcism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, they convinced him to fly from England to Connecticut for this exorcism. The trip was actually sponsored by a tabloid called The People, which is fascinating. Now, like I said, he was very skeptical. He was convinced that nothing was going to happen and that this was just like, he was just doing it kind of to do it. The exorcism was conducted by Bishop Robert McKenna alongside some police officers in case anything went wrong.
Oh,
and
interesting. They actually got like a team. Okay.
Yeah.
A little different.
Yeah, I feel like this case is a little bit different because it's not ghosts and demons in a house.
Yeah.
It's a single person. And they had him fly out to them instead of traveling to the haunted house or whatnot. This one didn't really gain a lot of public traction. Like, there's not that much on it, which I find very interesting.
It's just a little bit odd if there's so much going on with it, but then there's not any.
Yeah, I mean, in like his hometown, they were talking about it on the news, and this does get talked about by like a paranormal docu-series at one point in the 90s, but some YouTubers talk about it, but it's not a very well-known, it's definitely not well-known in regards to Ed and Lorraine. But during the exorcism, nothing was really happening. There was a solid hour and a half where it was just kind of like Bill was just sitting there.
That's super awkward. He's just like sitting there.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, Bishop Robert McKenna tells the demon to reveal itself. Now, apparently at this time, Bill starts showing his teeth and growling. His hands start going into the claw shape, and he starts losing his mind. Bill recalls that he felt that cold sensation in his body, and the rage and adrenaline just go absolute wild throughout his body. And the bishop is saying something like, "Oh, I cast you out." You know, the typical exorcism talk.
Yep.
Bill suddenly falls to the ground, completely limp, and lets out one last little growl. And that was it. And he has not had a single incident that has been reported ever since.
That's very, very odd. I don't know what to feel about that one.
One little thing I will note is the Warrens did put out a book about it called Werewolf, a true story of demonic possession.
Did they now? They've never done anything like that before. That's shocking to me that they would try to get a cash grab on this.
Yeah. Now, it did not become a movie, but...
Yet.
Not yet. Maybe we're the ones to kick it off.
Yet.
But in 1992, Bill did make his last public appearance, confirming the exorcism cured him, and he doesn't have the outbursts anymore. But I will say we don't know anything past 1992.
I don't know what to say about that one.
I think it was lycanthropy, not the werewolf of infliction, but the mental illness of him believing he was turning into a wolf.
I think that would make more sense.
Yeah. And, you know, with the adrenaline, people, I mean, you know, you hear about like a woman lifting a car to save her baby.
Yeah.
So I think if you have the right experience of adrenaline, that 9-year-old could have ripped the fence post, perhaps.
Perhaps. Or maybe the story was elaborated some.
That very easily could have been done by Ed and Lorraine, yeah.
They tend to do that, these two.
Yeah. But there are photos of him wolfing out and like going crazy in the hospital and whatnot. So I do believe he was suffering from the lycanthropy. I just don't think it was mystical. Yeah, I think it was just mental illness. I think probably potentially the same for the Wolf of Bedburg. I mean, the lycanthropy mental illness has been documented in history for thousands of years.
I mean, it just makes a little bit more sense. I don't know. I don't think I'm a big believer in werewolves.
Me either.
Out of all the wild, weird things that you and me are like, absolutely. This is the one where we're like, I don't think so.
Well, what do you think about the ones that are very obviously not turning into wolves, but are the beasts themselves, like Beast of Bray Road and Old Stinker?
Old Stinker. Perhaps maybe skinwalkers, something of that nature.
That's what I was thinking. To me, it makes sense for a werewolf to be just a skinwalker in a wolf disguise.
To me, yeah. I feel like I lean more to that notion than people turning into wolf people, werewolves.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have on werewolves.
Well, you know what? Now I know a whole lot of information on werewolves I didn't know.
Yeah.
I liked it. This is the one time in the history of Nessie's Dead that I haven't said, I believe it.
Yeah, I think this is literally the one time.
You got me. You found the one thing.
I might have a few more up my sleeve.
Oh, okay. We'll see.
We'll see.
I think it was fun. I liked it.
Thank you.
It's a lot of lore and history there. I didn't really realize there was that much history about the werewolf And
Yeah, I mean, there's more. There
oh,
was a lot. The werewolf lore is deep. It is crazy. I didn't realize the infatuation. Like, I always thought vampires were the big
yeah.
spooky monster.
I feel like I like vampires more.
Oh, I'm team vampires.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we lean
yeah, for
towards
sure.
that.
But werewolves have a much older history and much broader history. They've had actually a bigger impact culturally,
That's really
which is very weird.
fascinating.
I
Yeah.
mean, vampires came about in like the 1700s,
Mm.
so they're also pretty new.
I would have thought vampires would have been older, but yeah, I guess
There
not.
are some accounts of, I think the oldest account of something like the vampire is really, really old, but it's a word that is loosely translated to be similar to vampire.
Hmm.
It's not exactly what we consider a vampire to be.
Oh,
I
okay.
think there are reports in history of vampiric type of entities, but the vampire as we know, like the undead bloodsucker, is like 1700s.
Oh, well, dang.
And I think it came about after disease, some type of disease situation.
Like a plague?
Something,
Probably. There's always a plague back then.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
we'll
want to
see.
do one about all vampires. I feel like that would be more fun,
Yeah.
honestly, just because I'm more into that. This was not supposed to be this. I was actually going to cover just the South End werewolf, but as I'm doing all the research, I'm like, well, there is a lot of info I can get into. It's just going to be kind of like it would just be me drawing it all out. So I was like, let me compress it and just talk about other werewolves. And I'm like, well, I have to talk about the history. So I was like, oh, it's just a werewolf episode now.
It's a whole deal. We get it all.
Shapeshifters, werewolves, etc.
That's what we do.
Well, then we'll have to say goodnight.
And pleasant nightmares.
Bye.
Bye.